Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and we're back with another Battletech guide today. Building up to some specific mech building guides and lance composition guides, we're going to look at mech roles, a crucial element when it comes to making your own lances. Hopefully the information in this guide helps you get started. An important thing to keep in mind is that neither my mech recommendations nor the stock roles provided by the game are gospel. They're guidelines. If you can make a certain mech work in a certain role based on your playstyle, you should absolutely experiment with that idea and have fun trying to make it work. In fact, feel free to share your off-kilter mech roles in the comments down below. I'm a big fan of creativity, especially when it actually works. Also, just because a role exists, it doesn't mean it's suited for every mission. The first role worth discussing is that of the Scout. The name should make it pretty clear what these mechs are meant to do. They try to spot the enemy, giving you vital information on the makeup and position of the opposition forces, allowing you to plan your approach, and maybe even allowing you to start firing away before the enemy can. Not all weapons need a direct line of sight to fire. Long-range missiles, or LRMs, are an excellent example, as are long-range ballistics like the autocannons that can fire well beyond sight ranges. So, if you have a scout up front able to spot the enemy, your artillery and sniper-type mechs can fire their salvos from a safe distance, potentially knocking down, disarming, or destroying enemy mechs before they're able to open fire at their optimal ranges. Scouts, as such, are extremely light, extremely small, extremely fast mechs with little to no firepower, and most of their tonnage dedicated to armor for survivability in dangerous scenarios. Even with armor maxed out, these mechs aren't capable of carrying all that much, so you might consider giving them jump jets and some light armament if you'd like to play a little riskier, using them to fire into the backs of isolated enemy mechs, but remember, these mechs aren't supposed to last long in sustained combat. You're more likely to use those jump jets to get out of a sticky situation and hide behind a rock or building or in a forest. The presence of these mechs greatly increases the operating range of your lance. Unless you are very careful though, you can lose your scout early on, and at that point you may as well have taken more of a fighter instead. The ideal mech warrior in a scout mech will have sensor lock to help identify and fire upon mechs that are within sensor range but outside of line of sight, and sensor lock also reduces evasion pips of an enemy mech by 2, so you'll want to reserve your scouts often, as they typically come first in the turn order. This allows an enemy mech to move first, which in turn allows you to remove their defensive benefits from evasion. You might also want a mech warrior with evasive movement in here to make sure this mech stays operational even when under heavy fire. Typical scouts are locusts, cicada, spiders, and jenners. Hypothetically, any mech can be used as a scout mech, but keep in mind the key purpose of this role. Move in, light up the enemy, stay alive, make sure you build accordingly. The next role to consider is the Striker. Also on the faster side of things, though not as much as a scout, Strikers are hit and run and flanking specialists, built to cause a tremendous amount of damage and fall back into safety. Typically built for mid to close range use, Strikers are excellent alpha strikers, great for focusing down a specific side or aspect of a mech. This includes approaches such as firing into their back, trying to weaken one side, or trying to instigate overheating. To fulfill their roles as hit-and-run or flanking specialists, it's often a good idea to equip them with jump jets. This allows for higher mobility and easier flanking. A major weakness on Strikers is a middling amount of armor and their likelihood to overheat, especially when armed with lasers and jump jets, so make sure you can pull them back for cooling when needed, or to avoid their use on extremely hot biomes or biomes without any atmosphere. You'll want to mech high up the initiative order, but you're going to want to reserve till the end of the turn, hiding behind cover. This allows your Striker to step out from behind cover after enemies have had their evasive capabilities stripped and open fire with all of their equipment. In other words, alpha striking. And I find a good skill to pair with the Strikers is Ace Pilot. This skill allows a mech to move after firing. What that translates into is an opportunity to pull out from behind cover after reserving to the end of the turn, alpha striking an enemy mech, and then alpha striking the same mech at the start of the next turn before pulling back into cover. This approach allows the Striker to strip enemy armor or overheat a slightly preheated mech. With SRMs or short-range missiles and a little bit of luck, Strikers can also hope to get some critical hits in, and it's typically a good idea to have a bit of a bulkier mech near your Striker to distract potential enemy focus fire from taking your Striker down too quickly. Potential Strikers include Jenners, Commandos, Griffins, and Firestarters, the last of which is particularly suited for overheating mechs with flamers or for pushing in with machine guns and trying to get lucky headshots to cause pilot injuries. Next up, we have the Cavalry or Skirmisher, a very interesting role on the battlefield that is all about adaptation. Intended to be highly mobile, you'll typically want to equip your skirmishers with jump jets to help them perform their tasks of undermining enemy mech capabilities. The mobility can be used to split enemy firing arcs through flanking, often forcing the enemy lance to pick between two distinct engagement angles to protect itself from, the front or the flanking side. This can open the enemy up for rear shots by baiting an engagement to either extreme, though you have to be careful not to leave your skirmisher too far from the rest of the lance and possibly focused down on by the enemy. The ideal loadout for a skirmisher is primarily medium-range equipment with some long-range options while also being able to deliver a decent punch. This is probably the ultimate strength and weakness of the role, as the jack-of-all-trades approach means at least something is ineffective at all times. As I mentioned earlier, adaptation is the name of the game with a skirmisher. Intel is essential for this role, as the skirmisher has to respond to enemy mech capabilities from as early as possible. Is there a fire support or sniper piece on the other side with plenty of LRMs but nothing to handle close-range combat? Close the gap as quickly as possible and get within minimum ranges of that mech. Does the enemy have a mech that is built for close range or melee combat? Then the skirmisher must shoot and scoot, maintaining a distance that is out of optimal range for that target mech. As you can see, jump jets are ideal for this role because of the high degree of mobility they afford, allowing your skirmishers to take advantage of lapses in enemy ranged capabilities and also to fall back behind terrain or structures when needed. Once more, an ace pilot isn't a terrible idea for this role of mech. The best mechs for the role are probably the Shadowhawks alongside the Wolverines, Griffins, Grasshoppers, and the Dragons of the world. Remember, you're looking for a mech that is a bit of a jack of all trades, including melee, and you want the option of jump jets for high maneuverability. And then we get to the Brawler, the heavily armored, close-range damage giver and taker of the lance. These mechs are slow in comparison to previously discussed mechs and are great to close the gap, potentially sprinting until in range and pummeling enemy mechs, hoping to make quick work through focus fire and assistance from friendly mechs in the distance. If tonnage is available, it's not a bad idea to add a long-range weapon or two to support the slow, lumbering approach of the Brawler, and if things turn south, Brawlers can have a bit of a hard time falling back into safety, so they must be used or positioned judiciously despite their hitting power. Fortunately, Brawlers are heavily armored, so it takes some time before things start to head south for them in a head-on engagement. When flanked with an exposed rear, however, the Brawler is in trouble if it can't reposition itself quickly, or if it doesn't have a buddy protecting that rear angle of fire. Rear armor, as always, is a weak point. As you can probably imagine, Brawlers are also great for scaring enemy scouts and other light mechs as well. They will absolutely punish a scout that gets too close or a skirmisher or striker that is caught with its metaphorical pants down. If available, get a mech warrior with bulwark into your Brawlers. This allows them to stay stationary and power through focus fire if necessary, and a high pilot skill for better melee and faster gap closing isn't a bad idea either. A relatively simple role, there are a few mechs that are suited for the job. The King Crab, Atlas, Awesome, and Black Knight are all great fits in the role with their choices in quantity of armament and their strong armor, though when it comes to the latter, the Black Knight is a little lacking, and you need to be wary as such. Then there's Fire Support, or Sniper, or Artillery, I suppose. A pretty self-explanatory role. These mechs are meant to provide support from a great distance, and they require lighter, faster mechs to move ahead and scout for them so that the Sniper can open fire without needing to expose itself. Able to cause a great deal of physical damage, and when equipped accordingly, this damage extends into stability damage. The Sniper or Fire Support is usually slow and meant to be left behind, but not too far behind, as an enemy mech that is able to close the gap will be able to quickly ruin a sniper's day. Snipers are low on armor, low on mobility, and usually have a terrible short-range efficiency, including melee. You'll want to give them LRMs or AC-5s, depending on the angle of approach you want to take with them, indirect fire as an option or direct fire only, and you should prepare to sprint and brace if you allow an enemy mech to get too close. I think it's a good idea to get a mech warrior with multi-target into your snipers and fire support, as this allows them to destroy one target and begin damage on to the next one with the typically massive arsenal they carry. You should also look into having a decent level of tactics to improve range and indirect fire accuracy of your sniper and fire support mechs. My personal favorite is the Stalker. It has room for 4 LRM-20s, and I'm personally a fan of what they call an LRM boat. Other options include Trebuchet and Catapults, with the latter being superior in the case of Battletech, and Jaeger mechs can deliver pain via autocannons, while an Awesome can bring in 3 PPCs for an immense amount of long-range damage. I hope you gleaned some new information from this video. Roles are a very important thing to keep in mind when designing lances, and as per your requests, I'm working towards a lance building guide. Naturally, I want to make sure we're all familiar with some core concepts such as roles first, and if you have any other topics that you'd like to see, let me know in the comments below. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Battletech, strategy, and tactical gaming content, and until next time, thank you for watching, and cheers.